Today is Tuesday, July 9th. We're talking about the trail of damage left behind from the first hurricane to hit the mainland U.S. this season and where it's headed next. Also, President Biden's latest message to members of his own party who are calling on him to stop running for re-election. And the new Republican Party platform, covering everything from immigration to abortion. Plus, what to expect when movie star Alec Baldwin goes on trial today, why protesters are lashing out against tourists in a European hotspot, and how a $1 billion donation is helping the next generation of American doctors. Those stories and more news to know today, next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Hurricane Beryl has weakened to a tropical depression, but not before causing widespread damage in Texas. The storm killed at least 8 people as it unleashed heavy rain, strong winds, flooding, and even some tornadoes. Hundreds of trees and power lines were knocked down. Thousands of flights were canceled, key shipping ports were closed, and nearly 3 million homes and businesses lost electricity, mostly in the Houston area. That's especially concerning since the heat index is expected to be in the triple digits again today, meaning people will anxiously be waiting for AC. Thousands of extra utility workers are in town to help restore power. Still, officials warn it could take several days to get to everyone. So the state is planning to open cooling centers as well as food and water distribution centers. The U.S. Coast Guard and FEMA are also on hand for search, rescue, and recovery. Now, more states are in the storm's path, including Louisiana, Arkansas, and Missouri. And even though Beryl is weakening, it could still cause heavy rain, flooding, and possible tornadoes. President Biden has a new message for his fellow Democrats who want him to drop out of the presidential race. Basically, he's saying he's not going anywhere. The president wrote congressional Dems a letter saying he's committed to running this race to the end, that he earned his spot in the primaries, and that to step aside now would disenfranchise the Americans who voted for him. He said it was time for conversations about changing nominees to stop, and that it's instead time for Democrats to come together and focus on defeating former President Trump in November. Biden spread the same message on a morning TV appearance, in a call with donors, and in a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus yesterday. All this comes as some top Democrats have raised concerns about the president's age and ability to win in November, though other lawmakers have since reiterated their support for Biden. He's set to be formally nominated at the Democratic Convention next month, setting him on a path for the general election in November. Republicans released their new national party platform, highlighting their priorities for the next 4 years. And for the first time in 4 decades, the GOP did not include anything supporting a national abortion ban. That reflects what former President Trump has been saying lately, that the issue should be left to the states. The new platform matches Trump on other issues as well. For example, it supports mass deportations of undocumented immigrants. It rules out cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and it promises to keep transgender women out of women's sports. In another sign of Trump's influence, it calls for the end of the, quote, weaponization of government and promotes election integrity. Trump has been speaking about election integrity quite a bit on the campaign trail as he claims the 2020 election was stolen, despite several courts, election authorities, and Trump's own Justice Department saying the opposite. The Democrats have not released their party platform just yet, but the DNC is expected to finalize things by the end of this month. So far, it's been a devastating week in Ukraine. Russia launched a wave of missile strikes against several Ukrainian cities, killing dozens of people. One of the strikes partially destroyed a children's hospital in Kyiv that cares for some of the sickest kids from around the country. Here in the U.S., President Biden called the attacks a, quote, horrific reminder of Russia's brutality. Ukraine's military says it was actually able to shoot down 30 of the 38 missiles Russia launched in yesterday's attack. Still, the Ukrainian defense minister called for more air defense systems to help the country fend off more aggression. Today, many of the world's most powerful leaders are all getting together in Washington, D.C. They're attending a NATO summit commemorating 75 years of the military alliance. But it won't all be celebratory. Allies will also be outlining key issues, like how they're working to help Ukraine fend off Russia's invasion. And they're set to talk about threats China is posing, like disinformation campaigns meant to raise doubts in democratic governments. NATO will also be confronting a lot of political issues, like what will happen if former President Trump wins in November. Because things could drastically change. Biden and Trump have very different feelings toward NATO. Biden says it's essential to keep building NATO up to respond to all kinds of modern challenges and to, quite literally, keep the peace. And Trump is threatening to scale back America's commitment, since right now, not everyone contributes as much as the U.S. And there's also political turmoil in parts of Europe, like in France, where recently the far-right party that's skeptical of NATO won more seats in parliament. This will also be the new British Prime Minister's first appearance on the world stage since winning recent elections. And all of it makes a difference, since NATO policies require unanimous consent. So anytime there's a leadership shakeup, there are questions about how the alliance will look, even in the near future. To be continued. More news is still coming up, but first, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. There are so many parts of our lives that can be compared to others. Career, house, parenting, the list goes on. And while we all probably know comparison never really helps us, it can be hard to avoid. Whenever I get the urge to compare, because let's be honest, we all do at least sometimes, I can usually catch myself doing it now. Stop and try to reset into a more grateful, gracious mindset. It's thanks to strategies I've learned in therapy. Therapy is a great place to learn how to focus on what you really want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. I really think most everyone can benefit from therapy. So if you're interested but not sure where to start, BetterHelp makes it easy. It's entirely online and designed to suit your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Now back to the news. Thousands of protesters marched through the streets of Spain's most visited city to show tourists they were not welcome. They held signs and banners saying tourists go home and confronted visitors in front of hotels and restaurants, spraying many of them with water guns. Protesters say they wanted to express their anger about mass tourism and its impacts on Barcelona, pointing to high housing costs and social inequality. Barcelona's mayor has announced a series of measures to address their concerns lately, like he increased the nightly tourist tax and limited the number of cruise ship passengers. He says he also wants to end apartment rentals for tourists by 2028. Still, protesters want more, like an end to public spending on tourism promotion. By the way, Barcelona is not the only place in Spain where people are protesting against tourists. Similar protests have also been held in the Canary Islands, Mallorca, and elsewhere. Today, Alec Baldwin is set to go to trial over his role in a deadly shooting. It's now been nearly 3 years since cinematographer Helena Hutchins was killed on the film set of Rust when the gun Baldwin was rehearsing with went off. Now he's charged with felony involuntary manslaughter. And if Baldwin is convicted, he could get up to 18 months in prison. Already, the armorer who was on set has been convicted of the same charge and is already serving her 18 months. Baldwin's trial is expected to last about 2 weeks. So far, he has not said if he plans to take the stand in his own defense, but other crew members who were eyewitnesses to the shooting are expected to testify. The whole trial will be streamed and broadcast by several outlets, including Court TV, and we will keep you updated. Remember we told you about how the U.S. Justice Department offered Boeing a plea deal? Well, now the plane maker has accepted. It agreed to plead guilty to misleading air safety regulators in the run-up to 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes a few years ago. And as part of that deal, Boeing will have to pay a second $244 million fine and spend $455 million over the next 3 years to improve compliance and safety programs. Boeing will also have to hire an independent monitor for 3 years to oversee improvements. But all of this falls far short of what the families of crash victims wanted. They asked federal prosecutors to seek a fine as high as $25 billion to prosecute Boeing at trial without concessions and pursue other charges against the company and specific executives. So their lawyers say they're against the plea deal and that they're going to keep pushing for a public trial. A court still needs to sign off on Boeing's agreement with the DOJ, which could come later this month. It's also worth noting, even though no individual Boeing executives or employees face charges now, the deal does not offer them immunity. So this case may still not be over, even if the deal is approved in court. There are now even fewer places where you can write personal checks. Target is the latest retail giant to announce it will no longer accept checks starting next week. It's a policy that already exists at some other stores like Whole Foods and Aldi. Target says it's making the change since not a lot of customers are using them anyway. Federal Reserve data actually shows using personal checks as a payment method has been on the decline for years. Last year, checks accounted for only 3% of payments. And that percentage is expected to keep going down as more options become available. Target will still take cash, credit and debit cards, Target Circle cards, digital wallets, Snap cards, and buy now, pay later services. Most medical students at Johns Hopkins University are receiving a life-changing gift, free tuition. Michael Bloomberg's philanthropic organization just donated $1 billion to make it happen. The school says families earning less than $300,000 a year will qualify for free tuition starting in the fall. Students whose families earn up to $175,000 will also have their living expenses covered. Bloomberg Philanthropies says it wanted to donate since the cost of medical school has kept many aspiring doctors away. And even when doctors graduate, they often choose higher-paying fields to pay off their debt, instead of important areas like internal medicine and pediatrics. This isn't the first time the organization has donated to Johns Hopkins. All in all, Bloomberg has now given the school more than $4.5 billion. Well, that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, a break to thank our sponsor, Quince. I love taking vacations. I don't really love the packing part. But thankfully, Quince makes it easier with versatile, high-quality vacation essentials. For example, my washable silk tank. I can have the elegance and feeling and look of silk without the worry of it getting dirty. I love my organic cotton knit blazer as well. It's a great layering piece. Quince has such great options all around. Premium European linen dresses, blouses and shorts from $30, premium luggage options, and more. And the best part? All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. So I really appreciate that part too. Pack your bags with high-quality essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/newsworthy for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE, quince.com/newsworthy to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, who is the one woman who's received a Medal of Honor? You can play along with us in our weekly roundup email that comes out each Friday. As for last week's trivia question, where did the world's first cell phone call take place? The answer is New York City. It was April 3rd, 1973, when an engineer at Motorola took a stroll on the streets of Manhattan with a brand new device that was about the size of a brick. The engineer, Martin Cooper, stood on a sidewalk on 6th Avenue and dialed a number. So who did he call? The head of AT&T's Bell Labs, who he'd been competing with to develop the device to brag about the big accomplishment. Then, a decade later, cell phones became available to average customers. Now, Cooper is known as the father of the cell phone, and he believes we are just at the beginning of the cell phone revolution. When asked what he sees for the future, he predicted devices embedded in our skin that can be charged by our bodies. And he thinks artificial intelligence will have a profound impact. Well, thank you so much for joining us and listening today. And thank you to our Newsworthy insiders for all your support of the show. We'll be back tomorrow with more news you need to know. Until then, have a great day.